Shalom and a happy Earth Day from Israel. My name is Orli Ronen. I'm the head of the Urban Sustainability and Innovation Lab at the Porter School for Environmental Studies, Tel Aviv University, and an active member of the Israeli Climate Coalition. Sustainability in Hebrew, kayamut, is a new word with an ancient root, kiyum, existence, which is actually the theme of the day, celebrating the earth and our existence on it. Israel has been identified as a global hotspot for this assumption, and we, the environmental NGOs, are continuously working to ensure that indeed we continue to cherish and celebrate this relationship. It is not easy. There are a multitude of opposing interests and priorities. But this has also been a tremendous catalyst for bottom-up activism here in Israel. Today, we will share with you a short glimpse of the Israeli climate activism. The event today is part of a worldwide campaign headed by Gabi Ashkenazi, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, and taking place in embassies around the world in order to raise awareness of climate change and sustainability. And now for my co-host, Michael.
Thank you, Orli, and happy Earth Day to everybody. My name is Michael Raphael. I am the organizer of People of the Mediterranean in Israel, which actually develops community-based groups that try to protect as much as possible this wonderful gift that we have, which is our oceans and seas. This is a special year for us in a sense because we just got over a pretty serious oil spill. And I think that when something's being taken away from you, you appreciate it a lot more. Unfortunately, that's one of our human characteristics that's very important when we talk about Earth Day and we talk about protecting the Earth, because as we all know, we're at a time of climate and ecological crisis. And some of the stuff we used to do in the past when thinking about the planet, saying that, well, we have time to educate, to move forward, slow reforms and so on. Unfortunately, those days are over, and it's an emergency, and we really need to change the way we relate and treat the planet. So on this Earth Day, I really hope that we understand the urgency and understand that the old actions we used to take need to be changed, and that we need to do things a lot quicker and with a lot more of emergency in the background. So thank you, Orli, and Orli is going to present the first person.
Thank you, and hopefully we'll be able to convey the sense of urgency on the one hand, but also the opportunities on the other hand. And I'd like to invite our first speaker, Uriel Klar, Director of PLANETech, who will be speaking about climate change technologies coming from here, from Israel.
Uriel? Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Orli and Michael, and happy Earth Day for everyone. So I'll share my screen presentation with you. So as Orli said, my name is Uriel Klar. I'm the director of PLANETech. PLANETech is an innovation community for climate change technologies. We are focusing on how technologies can tackle climate change challenges and help accelerate the process of decarbonizing the economy and help adapting to the changing climate. PLANETech is a nonprofit organization, and two of our partners are the Israel Innovation Institute, which is a nonprofit organization which promotes and builds innovation communities over a decade in different sectors. There's nearly 2,000 startups and over 27,000 community members as part of the Israel Innovation Institute. Our second partner is Consensus Business Group, which is a UK-based investment group that invested in Israel over $500 million, both in funds and in startups. So as I said, we are an innovation community. As an innovation community, we have three main goals. Our first goal is to modify business focus and technologies towards climate change challenges. And that's a huge, huge goal that we have. We're looking at innovators of different kinds, especially startups, trying to help them understand how can they shift their technologies and business model towards climate change. And here, as Orli mentioned just before, looking at climate change also as an opportunity for growth and for business for those startups. So it's not only looking at the environmental aspects of climate change, but also at the opportunities that exist right now for growing the business and technologies based on these challenges. The second goal of PLANETech is implement and deploy innovative climate change technologies. So I had a startup, I was an entrepreneur a few years ago, and I understand how important it is to get your product from a PowerPoint presentation to the real life, actually test it and have a good partners that can validate it and tell you that what you're imagining is actually working. So this huge gap of implementation is something that we have a huge focus on, and I'll elaborate it on this over the next few slides. And our last goal, which is probably our most significant one, is to build an active global network for climate tech innovators, investors, multinational corporations, while positioning Israel as an international focal point for climate change technologies. And here, the potential for Israel to be such a focal point is huge. We're already known for our great startups and technologies, but there's a real opportunity here to bring the Israeli innovation and technologies to work around climate change. And that's something that we wish to promote over the next few years. We have 3 modes of action. The first one is educating. We're looking at sharing knowledge and discovering opportunities. And here we focus our efforts on the innovation ecosystem. We're trying to provide this type of knowledge about climate change, the basic terminology, but also the opportunities that climate change presents to the innovation ecosystem. And that's a huge, huge part of what we're trying to do. And that type of market education is significant, especially now for us in our activities. The second mode of action is connecting. We're looking at collaborations between local and global stakeholders, and that's something that we understand how the importance of it for accelerating processes of innovation, implementation, and that's between startups, academy, corporates, investors, countries, cities, and again, not only in Israel, looking outside and understanding that we can learn from others and from their experience. Lastly, implementing. We're looking to apply technologies to solve the real climate change challenges. And that's something that we're trying to promote from day one, and I can share some examples very soon. So we understand that all of us are part of tackling climate change, and our approach for that is helping and supporting organizations in discovering how their technologies and their businesses can address climate change challenges while gaining economic value. So it's not only the usual suspects that were defined previously as clean tech that are dealing with climate change. We're looking at probably all of the sectors around there that can address climate change in a way. We want to help these organizations understand why climate change is important and how can they incorporate it as part of their business. The second bullet here is about nurturing overlooked sectors and technologies that bring true innovation to our planet. So usually when we speak about climate change and climate change technologies, we probably think about renewable energy, maybe about water technologies, but there's much more than that. There's smart mobility, ag tech, food technologies, waste technologies, materials, constructions, and many more. We want to look at these overlooked sectors that usually are not associated with climate change and put our focus on there. Lastly, we believe in a challenge-oriented approach. This challenge-oriented approach allows to think, discuss, and collaborate around real pressing gaps and needs. And this approach of challenge-centric work is especially important when we work with innovators. Usually, and especially here in Israel, we're running straight directly to the solution and to the technology. But when we're speaking about a global challenge such as climate change, we need to start with the challenges, with the real challenges, then find the solutions that can address it. And again, solutions can come from different directions, from different sectors, and the workaround challenges really allows that. So looking at these challenges, at PLANETech, we have 4 main challenge areas. The first challenge area is the built environment, and that's where we live. These are the buildings and infrastructure which are part of the built environment. The second challenge area is materials, the things that we make, the actual products, the waste that they generate, and that's a huge part of and focus point for us as a community. The third challenge area is land use, how we impact our land, and there's many, many different aspects of that. Lastly, and probably the most overlooked challenge area here is nature, and that's what we need to revive. Usually innovation and technologies are not associated with the natural environment, and we believe that it must look at the natural environment as a place for innovation, since it's a huge part of how we deal with climate change. If I share some examples and information about each and every challenge area, we can see that under the built environment, we're looking at optimizing energy infrastructure by smart management and renewable sources, and everything which is associated with energy generation, storage, transmission, usage is highly important when we speak about the built environment, and all of us already know that. We're also focusing and dealing with improving construction processes and reducing buildings' carbon footprint, and there's a great example about it that I'll present later. Lastly here, accelerating sustainable mobility solutions and infrastructure in urban and rural areas. So all of these and many other things are part of the challenge area that we refer as the built environment. The second challenge area is materials, the things that we make. So here we're looking at transitioning to manufacturing sustainable materials with circular material flows, utilizing the waste as a resource and improving waste management in municipalities and industries. And that's, again, another overlooked sector that must get the focus that it deserves as part of dealing with climate change. Lastly, capturing and storing atmospheric carbon. That's a huge focus and a huge trend right now. The third challenge area is land use, and here we're looking at regenerative agriculture, alternative proteins, and food waste and food systems. All of these are highly important, usually neglected when speaking about the old clean tech, and highly relevant for the new climate tech. Lastly, nature, natural environment. Here we're looking at prevention of wildfires, managing oceans and water resources in a holistic approach, but also predicting weather patterns, air pollution, and extreme weather disasters. All of these 4 challenge areas and the challenges that are under them will help us tackle climate change challenges using technological innovation. I do want to share with you 2 recent projects that we worked on. The first one is a call for action for technologies that can support the remediation efforts of the oil spill in Israel's coastline, looking at the actual immediate response, but also prevention of future cases. And we had a great pilot with an amazing startup and 1 municipality in Israel already detecting tar pollution at the coastline. And the second project here is Zero Carbon Hospital Challenge, which is an opportunity for a funded pilot for energy efficiency technologies, where we map the challenges of the hospital here, identify relevant startups, and in the end, implementing technologies and giving the opportunity for a funded pilot with Soroka Hospital. So that's in about 10 minutes about PLANETech. Thank you for your time. That's my email and my personal phone number. Feel free to contact me. And thank you for hosting this event. So that's it from my side.
Thank you, Uriel, for a fascinating and very quick presentation. I'd like to pose one question. It relates to the actual implementation of all these various ideas and innovation. We know that in Israel, for instance, we're very good at creating innovations, but less successful in actually implementing them. And we see a lot of alpha phases, but much less beta phases. What's your take on that?
I mean, that's a great note. Since we are leading with building the technologies and developing them, usually we see the implementation overseas. I think that as an innovation community that is located here in Israel, we are really looking to get more implementation here in Israel, and that's also accelerating the acceptance and the actual, importance of getting these technologies to Israel. That will reduce greenhouse gases emissions, not only overseas, but also here in Israel. And I think that one of the interesting things that we can see for Israel as a global leader with this type of technologies, that although we're not very good at implementing right here, if we look at our impact globally, we are disproportionate to our size as a country. So that's something good that we can be proud of, but we must implement in-house.
Thank you so much, Uriel. Yes, may that be our blessing upon our government and Knesset this year, that they implement all the great technologies that we have in Israel that we know, but maybe we didn't implement. Next, we're going to talk to Uri Katzman, who's a project leader at YKCenter and SDGIsrael. And the topic is going to be financing the SDGs and creating national alignment. Thank you, Uri.
Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you, Orli. Thank you, Michael. And hello, all. My name is Uri Katzman, and I'm the director of the SDGIsrael project, and I work for the YKCenter. And today I'd like to share with you some of the knowledge we've gained over the past number of years around financing the SDGs and creating national alignment around the SDGs. Our lessons learned come from our experience, our partners and initiatives from around the world, and some are from right here at home in Israel. So just before we begin, just so we're all on the same page, a short reminder about the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. In December 2015, the UN achieved a remarkable agreement in which all the member states committed to reaching 17 Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And the SDGs represent a global consensus on what are the most important environmental, social, and economic goals we have as humanity. They represent a global paradigm shift, a united agenda to live on our planet sustainably. Now, to achieve the SDGs, we would require trillions of dollars in investments annually. Currently, private and public spending on the SDGs is estimated at around $1.4 trillion, which is remarkable, but it's not enough. Considering the impact of COVID, we may be falling behind even further than we anticipated on many of the goals. Now, due to the size of investments necessary, the main question is, how do we obtain these funds? Well, the SDGs may represent trillions of dollars in investment opportunities, but the vast majority of them are long-term investments. And moreover, many of the investments that the SDGs require are in environmental and social fields. These are areas that traditionally are harder to finance with private capital because they don't bring especially high returns. However, if we look at the actual impact of investing in social and environmental areas, much of the impact can be seen as external. We call these impacts economic externalities, plainly meaning they're not quantified in dollars or in economic terms necessarily. So that means that investing in SDGs doesn't necessarily create high economic returns, but they do create social and environmental impact that is beneficial for people, the planet and countries. So put simply, when investing in SDGs, the private investor receives economic profits while others, like the government or the public, get environmental and social benefits. This is why it's imperative for countries to think about investing in SDGs while encouraging the private sector to participate. So if countries have a vested interest in financing the SDGs, why don't they? Well, some do, mainly countries that have resources for it, such as Sweden, the Netherlands, etc. But the majority of developing countries struggle with creating initiatives or the infrastructure to make the SDGs happen. Like I said, the SDGs require long-term investment and funds that countries may lack. So where do we find such investments? The main source of long-term investments in the world are the pension and insurance funds, and that includes national social securities. So this is where governments come in. Governments have to manage the financing of the SDGs and the regulation around them. A way to do this is if each country could issue a special long-term bond which can cover those SDG investments. And this idea isn't a novel idea. It is actually based on what the state of Israel did in its infancy. Soon after the War of Independence and the state of Israel was established, government coffers were empty due to the high cost of the War of Independence and the unusual challenges that stemmed from the need to absorb a large number of Jewish refugees from European and Arab countries. So the population was very young, there were no jobs, and there was an urgent need to invest in infrastructure, in factories, in housing, in jobs, and more. So the young government of Israel encouraged the creation of insurance and pension arrangements and established a social security system. This system would take care of the population that was due to retire several decades later, while incentivizing savings that were invested back into the country. So the government issued to retirement institutions long-term bonds bearing high yields. And they created tax arrangements that enabled these institutions to offer very attractive retirement plans with high yields to savers. This created a high rate of savings in our country, and the funds raised through these special long-term bonds fed a development budget. That budget was used to activate a number of specialized development banks that undertook impact investments for development of the country. This was actually a major tool to finance the country's growth during its first 4 decades. So if I summarize that plainly, governments issue bonds to insurance and pension funds who offer attractive plans to the public, incentivizing saving. Those bonds pay for a development budget that serves the country as a whole and creates jobs for most of the public. In turn, this motivates larger long-term savings and enables financial institutions to finance more impact investment in development. As long as these investments continue to yield high returns, this cycle of positive feedback continues. And there is essentially a lesson to be learned here. We can fund the SDGs through long-term investments of the pension and social security funds. And many countries, especially developing countries, can learn from this example of public-private collaboration and can adapt it to their needs. This is also an opportunity for countries with no social security to create that infrastructure, just like Israel did, where they might not have existing pension and social security systems. And where they do, they can expand it for funds for the whole of the labor market, including the self-employed. But then this kind of brings the question of, what do we mean when we talk about financing the SDGs? What does financing them look like on the ground? And put simply, it means working with businesses and organizations that are advancing the SDGs. For us to be able to support such organizations, there must be a clear map of what organizations and businesses are aligned with the SDGs. And in 2019, YKCenter, a private business focused on accelerating adoption of the SDGs, launched an impact initiative aimed at grassroots support for the SDGs. The community is aptly named SDGIsrael and was designed as an ecosystem for the various stakeholders of the SDGs in Israel. Now, the SDGs can be convoluted at times with language that isn't suited for business and organizations might not understand it. Our community has developed a simple and efficient methodology to enroll organizations and businesses to incorporate SDGs into their core business and strategies, and then effectively communicate the impact that they create to the stakeholders and, importantly, also investors. So if you think about it, many funding opportunities today, whether it's the EU or multilateral development banks or impact-oriented funds, they all want to know what SDGs are being achieved through initiatives that apply to their programs or to their funding or their grants. And in order to allow more financing, private, public, or blended, the initiatives on the ground have to know how to communicate their commitments to sustainability, or to the SDGs in this case. Now, this is a gap that we are in the first stages of bridging. Our community works with various actors to make information, tools, and content around the SDGs accessible for all and in Hebrew. We create spaces for networking and collaboration. We raise awareness and map the implementation of the goals in Israel. The community holds events and workshops focused on practical implementation and best practices for impact measurement while using the SDGs as a framework. Our community puts an emphasis on helping small and medium businesses understand how to gauge their impact so they can align with national sustainability goals and communicate them properly. So I invite you all to visit our website, our sdgi.org.il, and be in touch with us if you would like to learn more about our work or about the idea of how we can finance the SDGs. And I hope that this glimpse at a possibility of alignment and financing around the SDGs will inspire you to make real progress on this Earth Day and truly push forth some meaningful tikkun olam, some repairing of the world out of Israel. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Or. Thanks a lot for that great presentation. I actually had a question. So we're talking about trying to get the civil society involved in really trying to make the SDGs implementable and sustainable. My question to you is, as an Israeli, somebody who roams around a lot in the civil society world, most people don't even know what SDG stands for. It's a really small niche of people. I know about it for quite a while because I've been involved with the United Nations as an employee, but I think that most people don't know about it. What are we doing to get that public support for such a great, important project?
That's a fantastic question. And the truth is that, first of all, we have to make that information accessible. It has to be in the language of the people that are going to use it. And then after you have this information both accessible in the language and all in one place in a way that people can reach out to it and Google it, if they hear those letters, all these acronyms flying around, if you know how to search for it and if you get to the right place, then first of all, if you have the information in a way that's easy for you to understand, that's the first step. The second step is, after you understand that this is a world of knowledge, that this is a field, what do you do with that knowledge? Now that you understand that there are 17 sustainable development goals, what are you to do with them? And that's where really the hard work comes in, because it takes looking at this from a macro to a micro view. So we start with 17 goals, but then we start to look at the different targets. There's 169 targets and then 232 indicators. And then breaking that down and explaining how each of them can be applicable, if they are applicable, to the relevant businesses and organizations. That is the work of bringing people into the fold, letting them understand what it exactly is. And then once they understand what it is, how to implement it so they can later communicate it and be aligned with the country they are in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Or. And our next speaker is really a representative of one of Israel's more inspiring environmental initiatives, which is actually targeted at the world and not necessarily on Israel. I'd like to invite Dr. Uri Shanas, who is the CEO and founder of Time, which appeals to every one of us to take personal responsibility for the earth. Uri?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Orli, Michael, and everyone. And thank you for joining us on this special day, Earth Day. And yeah, let's begin. So I think our most two challenges, great challenges in the world now, is climate change and species extinction. I think this comes before everything else. This is should be the high priority. And in fact, we are in great trouble now because we are losing forest area in the world the size of a football field almost every second. So some years it's 2 seconds, some years it's 3 seconds, but that's about the rate of losing forest. And in fact, scientists are talking about entering the sixth mass extinction, which is our fault. I mean, this is our deed. It's not a meteor that came into the ground, but it's all human caused. And it's just unbelievable that in 50 years we wiped out 60%. Now it's even more. They talk about 68% of all animal population around the world. Now, I've been teaching that to my students, trying to raise awareness, trying to give them data. But at a certain point, I started to think, is there anything else I can do aside of teaching or preaching? Can I do something about that? And the first thing that came to my mind was that I would like to protect all these natural areas around the world. I mean, this is the number one cause of species extinction, is the degradation or losing natural areas. And what I would like to do is, hack them and maybe, protect them and save them. But how do you do that? First thing I thought, well, I first need to prioritize. I was happy to know, and we already know that for several years, that there are places that are more important than others, and we call them biodiversity hotspots. These are biogeographical regions that are both significant in the number of species that they hold, and also that these places are under threat, under immediate threat. And they amount to only 2.3% of the land. Now, what was really surprising for me when I started to think about it was that 50% of hotspot areas around the world are in private ownership. So I thought, oh my God, that's wonderful. Let's go and just buy these places around the world. Now, this is the reason where I establish a new organization. It's called TIME. It stands for This Is My Earth. And the mission is to preserve lands that are home to unique ecosystem that are threatened by us. But we wanted to make it more innovative. So we wanted to enable every person around the world to be part of that, to help us to protect those places and to build actually a new community that is democratic, and a new tool that would be interactive and educating. How did we do that? So the first thing we said was, just a second, the first thing that we said, it would be affordable. Everyone could be part of our organization. It's only $1. $1, you have $1, you can go and become a member. And also, we wanted that to be very transparent and reliable and to take no overhead. So if a kid in a school or kindergarten gives his weekly allowance, we want to make sure that we take no overhead. He has to make, or she has to make sure that we do not take overhead. 100% of their money goes to where it's needed, goes to these places that we need to save, that are in urgent need. But more than that, we wanted to give them to be part of this organization. So we give them also a democratic vote. We let them decide where they want us to go and purchase these biodiversity hotspots around the world. And we also promise them that all the votes are equal, that whether you donated $1 or you donated $10,000 or $20,000, all have equal votes on our website. So in general, we establish a scientific advisory committee from scientists from all over the world that receive applications and decides which are the lands that will be uploaded to our website for our members to vote. We have a board member. Everybody is volunteering, and lots of volunteers from all over the world. We have, for example, on the right, on the corner, on the right, on the upper right, we have Jima from South Africa, and then Nihat from Toronto, and Mickey from New York, and etc., etc. The idea is that you have on our website each year or each campaign 3 lands around the world. So for example, now we have one in Belize, one in Ecuador, and one in Kenya, that we can actually go and save these lands, but we give you the opportunity to vote for them. And the money that is collected through the donations is distributed among the project depending on the number of votes they receive. And as soon as they reach the threshold that we can go and buy them, we stop the campaign, we go and purchase the land. And indeed, we already managed in the short time that we are on the ground to buy two important land in the upper Amazon, a forest, a beautiful forest in Colombia, a marine area in Belize, in the Caribbean, and we are about to purchase two lands in Brazil and in Kenya. But moreover than that, we wanted it to bring it to schools, to kindergarten, to education centers. And we found out that time is a really great tool to teach not only about nature, but to teach social sciences and decision-making and languages and geography and et cetera, et cetera. And lots of values goes in like democracy, equity, and activism. So practically now we have time programs going in Israel and starting also outside in Israel from preschool to university. And look what students say about that. They say, for example, these are students, high school students, talked about, I learned about myself that I can set up a goal and achieve it. I realized that even a 16-year-old can make a difference. After I voted on Time website, I truly felt like I changed something. And the activity allowed me to take initiative and realize that through my actions, I can promote goals that are important to me and not really on other to do it. So it's a wonderful, it's also becoming a wonderful educational tool in Israel and around the world. And so time, it's about education, it's about conservation, it's about democracy. And what I would like to see everyone to join in, even with a $1 or as much as you want, and just help us to go and save the world together. We can actually do that. And we would like to bring this responsibility for the world for each one of you and each one of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Uri. This is absolutely an open invitation for all of you to join in. And I'd like to expand on the question of people and planet and the local communities. How do the local communities play in these initiatives? Are they part of the decision? Are they, well, on to you.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful question. Indeed, we work with local communities. We work with local people. Actually, the lands do not belong to time. It belongs to the community often, or to the local organization. So for example, our first land in the upper Amazon in Peru, we actually handed over to two farmers, Isidoro and Donatilla, that we're in touch with. And Isidoro and Donatilla, we gave them a small part of the land that we purchased to do their agriculture, a very small part, but they protect the whole area for us, the whole land they protect for us, and we keep in touch with them. And there's a local organization that oversees that Isidoro and Donatilla do not cut any other trees, and so it's a multi-level actually organization.
Thank you so much for that interesting presentation. I'm going to introduce the next speaker, who's and I have to say, I was going to say a comment about this. I just want to say that there are a lot of women in the environmental movement, and the gender balance in this speaker list has not been the best choice, but it's really nice to hear all the speakers nonetheless. Doesn't matter what the gender, but we have to watch the gender as well. But anyways, I'd like to introduce our woman speaker of the night. Her name is Alla Voldman. She's the director of the Strategic Relations GFI, and she's going to talk about the Israeli alternative protein opportunity. And I'm really looking forward to hear about this one.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be representing the Good Food Institute, and it's a great privilege to be speaking in the Earth Day and also being representing a little bit the female side as well. So we are discussing here today because people love to eat meat, and the meat consumption trend is increasing. By 2050, the meat consumption is expected to double with the increase in population and in the improving lifestyle in developing countries. At the same time, it is clear today that the way that we produce the vast majority of the meat has an array of external costs that more and more societies are taking seriously. There are climate impacts, there is antimicrobial resistance, there are outbreaks of zoonotic diseases. In addition, with the pandemic that exposed the sensitivity of the global food supply chains, more and more governments have been shaping food security policies. The key premise of alternative protein is that an alternative way of producing meat is important, and if we could make the meat at fewer external costs, not require antibiotics, not have any possible zoonotic diseases, not have the same adverse impact on climate and oceans, that needs to be our strategy. Luckily, this is also a great economic opportunity. Conservative estimates predict that the alternative protein sector will capture about 10% of the animal protein market, which will result in hundreds of billions of dollars by 2030. And with the involvement of the major companies in the world, it is clear that it is no longer a niche field in food tech or agri-tech. It is a growing engine that touches on many of the significant challenges that the world possesses today. Many of the largest food companies in the world are involved in the field, whether through directing investment or through development of product lines and strategies. And not only food companies, pharmaceutical companies are also highly involved, specifically in the fields of cultivated meat. So when talking about alternative protein, we are focusing on three main technologies. The first one is cultivated meat, which means producing meat outside of the animal in cultivated facilities, which possess the same biological conditions. Plant-based meat, egg, and dairy are produced directly from plants. They comprise protein, fat, vitamins, and minerals. And the objective is to create the same mimicry in terms of mouthfeel, taste, texture, the appearance, and the way that these products cook. And the last technology is fermentation, which is widely known in the food industry. For alternative proteins, we utilize microorganisms to produce animal proteins, fat, or flavor and fragrance components for alternative protein products. For those not yet familiar with our organization, the GFI is a non-profit dedicated to accelerating the shift to a sustainable, healthy, and just food system. We are the leading organization in the field of alternative protein, and we serve as a knowledge hub in the field. We employ over 140 staff around the globe, and we work in three programmatic areas, in science and technology with a team of PhDs, which are working to advance and open source the science. Our corporate engagement works to build relationship with world big food manufacturers, meat companies, entrepreneurs, and startups. And our policy team work with governments and public organizations to advocate for public open access research. From speaking generally on alternative protein, I'm happy to jump to speak about Israel. Despite being a relatively young ecosystem, the Israeli research and innovation has already managed to build a name for itself as a global alternative protein hub. There are scientific and industrial experts in all the fields and disciplines relevant to alternative protein, from agrotech and cultivation of varieties, biotechnology, chemistry, plastics, genetic engineering and tissue engineering. 10% of the research grant of the international GFI is provided to Israeli scientists. There are active research done in the top universities in Israel, and all the major food companies in Israel are highly involved in the field, in addition to having two food tech incubators, which have a significant representation of alternative protein companies. This is today one of the hottest investment fields in the Israeli tech industry. In the past 3 years, it has exceeded the investment growth of many other technologies, including cyber. We're talking about roughly 40 startup companies. Some of them are under stealth mode. About a third is towards scale up and commercialization. And the numbers are increasing rapidly. And I would like to take the next few minutes to share with you our success stories, what we do today and how we can do even more than that together. Given the fact that this is a relatively young field, there is a great potential in collaboration and knowledge sharing to accelerate the development of the technology and address its challenges. And we are happy to connect and utilize our connections and network across the world. We have identified initially that there is a bottleneck of scientists and researchers in the field, and we have created the first academic university course, which is conducted in the top 4 universities in Israel. And we are currently in the process of distributing it abroad in Canada, India, Brazil, and Singapore. This is a great opportunity to develop the next generation of scientists and to strengthen academic connections also between countries. I'm happy here to give you a sneak peek to the first Israel State of Alternative Protein Innovation Report, which is going to be launched very soon this month, which provides a full landscape of the Israeli alternative protein scene in terms of investments, companies, academic involvement. We are working now in promoting an alternative protein national policy plan coordinated by Prime Minister Office, involving 8 government ministries and 2 authorities. And we have just launched this forum in a roundtable this January. We are really lucky to have great collaboration with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Israel and the Foreign Trade Administration. We participated in several events in China, Singapore, and Europe. In collaboration with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we have produced 2 videos that demonstrate the alternative protein industry. And we had the opportunity to introduce the alternative protein field, the Israeli ecosystem, and various collaboration opportunities with the economic attaches in Brazil, Korea, Mexico, Netherlands, China, and Singapore. And we are currently working on developing an international platform for alternative protein, business and academic collaboration for R&D projects, pilots, proof of concept between the Israeli startups and innovation to international companies, corporates, food manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies, as well as between scientists, and if possible to leverage also various bilateral agreements and funds that Israel has with so many countries. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'll be happy to answer any questions and feel free to contact us.
Hi, Alla. I don't know. I think the screen, the person who's managing the screen is off. Hello? Okay. So thank you so much, Alla, for that great lecture. And I just was thinking about some thoughts that went through my mind while so I'm a person who's in the field really and an activist. And I know that Tel Aviv is considered one of the most vegan cities in the world. And I was thinking that the biggest challenge that we're going to have with the whole issue of cultivation of meat is going to be the public relations. I mean, I was just thinking, how many of my vegan friends in Tel Aviv are going to eat a hamburger that's from cultivated meat? Or how many meat eaters are going to be eating cultivated meat? What are you guys thinking in terms of public relations? How are we going to convince people it's okay to eat a hamburger that was developed in a laboratory?
I think, first of all, it's great that you mentioned Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv and Israel is known not only in Israel, but also worldwide as a pilot country and a great beta site for alternative protein products, including cultivated meat products, because of the really big acceptance of such products, and maybe probably because of the shares of vegan, vegetarian, flexitarians, which is here. There's definitely an element of consumer exception when we are talking about cultivated meat. We do believe, and we see that in consumer surveys, that if we are able to create products which taste, which price, which have the accessibility and look as the conventional meat products, these would be the bigger obstacles for consumer acceptance and for consumers to try these products. And once we'll be there, and it's not that long until we'll be there, it will start to penetrate to the market. I'm not sure about the vegan community, but omnivores and flexitarians, which represent a big portion of the population, this is something which we do see as a potential to penetrate this market.
Thank you. Our last speaker today at this event is probably the newcomer of the 5 initiatives, and it's a pure bottom-up initiative, which we hope will be adopted worldwide and replicated. And I'm really happy to invite Daniel Katz, who is the project manager at the Good Energy Initiative, who will be presenting the climate forest, a multi-sectoral approach to urban afforestation. Daniel?
Okay, thank you very much, Orli, and thank you everyone and for the opportunity to present in this panel. I'll just upload the presentation. Okay, so my name is Daniel Katz. I am the project manager at the Good Energy Initiative, which is an environmental nonprofit organization focusing on hands-on projects to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I'm here today to talk about one of our projects, the Climate Forest, which is an urban afforestation project designed to benefit both the environment and the community. So for us, it started at the beginning of 2020, just as COVID-19 started hitting Israel. We sat down in our offices. We're a group of 4. So we sat down and we tried to think up of new projects that will fit the time. A long-time project of ours was tree planting with school children. So we wanted to try and figure out, how do we continue planting, but make sure that our trees live up to their full environmental potential and truly make a difference. So trees are, of course, a very ancient technology for carbon capturing, along with many other benefits for both environment and people alike. And we wanted to see, how can we bring all these benefits as close as possible to as many people as possible. And with 92% of Israel's population living in cities and COVID-19 showing us just how crucially important urban open spaces are, there was no question in mind that we need to plant our trees within the cities themselves. So after thorough examination, we've discovered that in almost every local municipality in Israel, there are many open public areas that are left unattended and usually become neglected and completely inaccessible to the public due to lack of resources. we've decided that the climate forest is going to focus on these areas, the ones in the bottom of the priority list and the ones that desperately need a loving hand. So in order to make our dream a reality, we've built the project on a multi-sectoral infrastructure. Each sector provides a different type of resource that is needed for the success and sustainability of the project, and of course receives a unique gain. So I would say that the innovation of the climate forest does not entail new technology or original patent. It's the creation of a mechanism that knows how to harness different stakeholders to a fairly simple yet very significant environmental action that in reality does not happen organically. So the key players in the climate forest mechanism are firstly the private sector. So we're talking about companies, businesses, organizations, and these take part in the project in two ways. So the first is financial support and carbon offsetting through the project as part of the company's environmental commitments towards their employees, customers, or other stakeholders. And the second way is through cooperations. With different cooperations with the private sectors, we're able to include different resources to the project that give us better ways of ensuring the prosperity of our trees. So for example, the international irrigation company, Netafim, which is an Israeli company, but now very much so international, has decided to sponsor the climate forest and donate complete irrigation systems to each of our plots. This is of course very beneficial for our trees, but also makes our project much more appealing to our next key player, the municipalities, the public sector. So participating municipalities receive from us a comprehensive set of tools and support regarding all aspects of the process. As part of the cooperation, they allocate the appropriate plots according to project criteria. They prepare the land for planting, and most importantly, they're in charge of long-lasting maintenance for our trees, which is a crucial element in the assurance that our trees survive for years to come. By participating in the project, the municipalities receive newly groomed public areas truly accessible to their residents, an environmental activity for the community, and of course, the many, many benefits of trees within the urban environment, such as reducing the urban heat island effect, encouraging biodiversity, reducing stormwater runoff, and much more. Last but not least, the community. The residents themselves play a key role in the success of our project with their use and presence in the newly formed groves. So for example, a woman walking her dog at 6 a.m. would see the irrigation system malfunction way before the municipal gardener on his regular routine. In addition, the presence of the community in these plots increases the commitment to the overall health of the trees and also reduces the cases of vandalism. The gain for the community is, of course, the formation of a new area for their use close to home and the immediate benefit of trees, which is shade, lower temperature in summer, and better air quality. So far, in the year and a half since the beginning of the project, we've been able to plant over 1,700 trees in 13 different municipalities all across Israel, with a very wide range of geographic, demographic, and socioeconomic backgrounds. More than 12 different companies, including international corporations and local businesses, support the project. Dozens of individual citizens donate trees to be planted in their names. And even the Israeli consulate in Boston has planted 30 trees with the climate forest, donating them in the name of 30 Boston senators that encouraged environmental acts. Which is something we were very proud of. We've built 3 different tree nurseries in schools and different cultural institutions all across Israel, containing more than 2,000 trees that await planting. And we have a list of more than 90 different municipalities that enrolled to our project and await further funding so that we can come to them as well. So this is how it looks in effect. This is one of the first plots that we planted in a city called Taibe in central Israel. And you can see before and after, it was a plot of land in the middle, in the middle of the city, surrounded by buildings and residents, completely filled with waste, neglected. And after the renovation that we gave it with the municipality, we just got a new grove, a new open place for the public to use. And here you can see some other examples of our plots. You can see in Be'er Sheva, in Tel Aviv, in the south, in the north, all around. And basically, I would just like to conclude that the climate forest is in effect a tree planting platform. It's a way to plant trees in a responsible and ecological way all across Israel. And anyone that wishes to join can do so very easily. At the end of the day, tree planting is a very simple, very tangible action that anyone can relate to and support in order to create a better future for all of us. So thank you very much, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Daniel. And again, as I said in the beginning, this is an open invitation for everybody to replicate and adopt. But I did want to address the question of climate change. As we all know, we're already within a warming climate, and trees, although definitely the best technology around, are also water dependent and sensitive to climate change. How do you address these aspects within your programs?
Okay, so firstly, we plant only endemic trees, which means trees that are from this geographical area that are well acclimated to our climate and our geographical terms. So what we do is we do plant our trees with irrigation systems, but we have a watering recipe that during the first 5 years they get water, but then slowly we reduce the amount of water in order for them to deepen their roots and eventually thrive on their own. So climate change affects all of us, and it affects the trees as well. But I think the way that we see it is that these trees that are, again, this is an afforestation project. So we're not affecting existing ecological systems, but we're planting trees where there was nothing before. So all these trees give us our benefits that we wouldn't have otherwise. So we have nothing to lose and everything to gain. And like you said, trees are just great technology. So they're worth spreading around.
אורלי, אתה מיוט? אורלי, אתה עדיין על מיוט?
Mute. Orli, אתה mute.
What a wonderful way to end our Earth Day hour today. And I'd like, first of all, to thank all of our speakers. I hope that you enjoyed and benefited from their presentations, and also got a glimpse of what is going on in Israel as far as climate activism, what our concerns are, what our challenges are. And again, thank you for the speakers for sharing this with us. Michael?
Yeah, all I can do is join Orli in thanking our speakers. And of course, it's nice to see all the different opportunities there are when we're talking about climate change and ecological extinction. At the same time, we need a new innovative way to really transmit this really important message that we are in a climate and ecological crisis, and we do need to move the dial really quickly rather than later. So it's an urgent need, and I hope we do it innovatively and creatively. So thank you very much, and happy Earth Day, and may our Earth be in a better place next year. Thanks a lot.
And before we part, we'd like to thank the organizers, Ambassador Gidon Bachar, the minister, the embassies around the world, and everybody who took part, Chaim and Sviva, for organizing it, and everybody who took part in this amazing hour. Thank you.